First Kings 8, let's call this one here, because now that the temple has been built and its furnishings have been completed, this is the chapter in which Solomon is going to offer up a prayer of dedication, but not before the ark is brought into the temple. And so that is what they're going to do, bringing it from Zion, the city of David, over to the temple. The priests and the Levites are going to place the ark and its furnishings in their proper places. And after that, Solomon is going to bless the Lord, basically thanking him for all that he has done, because I think Solomon realizes that without God, not only would he not have been this successful, but it didn't have to go this well. And so he's not only going to thank God, he is going to pray to God. And even though it is a relatively long prayer, there are a couple of things I want to focus on that seem to get at that purpose for why Solomon is praying or doing this at all. And over again, he is going to say, God, hear our prayer. And why is it? Is it a prayer for more prosperity? No, they're already doing well. But Solomon seems to envision a time when the people might stray. And over, he's talking about all of these different circumstances in which they could either sin individually against one another. And God, he's asking them to hear the prayer. And as he has empowered Solomon to do, please help resolve their disputes amicably and, more importantly, justly, even when Solomon's not necessarily the one hearing the case. Beyond that, when they sin as a nation and it's bringing them either defeat on the battlefield or misfortune in the fields or in other areas of their lives, saying, Lord, insofar as we turn to this place, he's going to say over and over again as they turn to this place. And Jesus is going to say later on when he's talking to the woman at the well in the Gospel of John, the place isn't necessarily the issue, but the second thing that Solomon is going to say is going to be the enduring thing. Not only through this prayer of dedication, but through Jesus' ministry, when Jesus is going to say, those who worship God are going to have to worship him in spirit and truth, because that is what God is seeking, those who are going to look to him and worship him in spirit and in truth. And so the place is important for Solomon, but the second thing he's going to say is when they repent and they turn, not only physically to this place, but they turn their lives around. Not, as we've talked about, not making a 360-degree turn all the way back into the things they were doing before, but make a dedicated turn in the direction that God is pointing them, and they stay true to that direction. Why? Because he is going to say, not only do I have to give thanks for all the foreign assistance they've had in building this temple, he's having to give thanks for the fact that, wait a minute, all eyes really are on us. And unlike me, when I can get tempted to misuse my platform and slant it towards popular opinion or what I think people want to hear, Solomon is saying that we are a nation that people are coming to, and insofar as they are coming to us, I need to first of all confess that we're imperfect. But just as we can set an example for what success looks like, this place gives us an opportunity to let the world know what recovery looks like. And Solomon, in doing that, is not just proving himself to be a wise man, he seems to be a man who is deeply connected to his purpose as king. See, because he could have taken his platform, as we would call it now, and simply used it to attract attention to himself. There are going to be kings down the road who are going to get the big head, even though they start out as godly kings. And if you know Solomon's story, you're going to see that he is going to stray later as well, which makes this a wise beginning, because he's going to say, look, in the good times, we've got to prepare for the lean times as well. And so not just the people, Solomon's making a wise move for himself as well, because he is going to need a foundation by which he can make his way back to God when he is going to begin to screw up in a very few chapters. And so as we look to this chapter where Solomon is dedicating the temple, it's interesting to note how much he's begging God to hear Israel's prayers when they turn and repent and again begin to set the kind of example that God is using them to set for the entire world, understanding that in another couple of chapters before Solomon actually does begin to make his mistakes, it's going to be absolutely clear that God has now exalted Israel above all the nations, and Solomon understands why. So that they can set an example of how, as we've talked about before, once again, God can show people how to have prosperity in a prolonged period of peace. But Solomon, recognizing that we're not perfect, says we can also set an example of how to get back on our feet when we screw up. And even though it would be great for us to set nothing but examples of how other people should be in the ways that we succeed, Solomon, as a wise man, seems to understand that God can not only use him and the people he's working with as an example for how to succeed, but as we mentioned before, he seems to be providing yet another example of a man who gets it, meaning the ways in which God can use us as an example of how we recover from the times when we aren't looking so successful.